Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another episode of Perspective with me, Julie Ali. And today, I know I say it every week when I have a very interesting guest, but today I'm super excited to have, I'd say, a dear friend, an old friend. We don't meet regularly at all, but when we do get together, there just isn't enough time to cover absolutely everything that we'd like to cover. In studio today, my dear friend Suraya Nawab, specialist wellness practitioner. She's also the director of Muslim AIDS program, and she is the founder and former director of the Islamic Care Line. On the show today, we are going to be talking about a very big topic, ageism and elder abuse. And I think as we go through the discussion on the show today, depending how old or young you are, please do some introspection and just kind of check where you're at in your life and how you're interacting with older and younger people in your life. So please stay with us for the next hour right here on Perspective. Assalamu alaikum to you. Welcome to the program.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and thank you for having me.
This is a huge topic because we'll start off by talking what is ageism. We're going to talk also about elder abuse, and I just think it is so big, it is so huge, and it covers such a wide area. But let's see how we progress and the awareness that we can create by way of the show. And also, I think, as I've mentioned, introspection of not only older people, but younger people as well, daughters, daughters-in-law, sons, sons-in-law, grandchildren, and of course the community at large. So in your understanding, Suraya, what do you believe is ageism? It's a new word that's been bandied about. What do we understand when we talk ageism? Does it equate to discrimination of older people?
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So yes, ageism is a new buzzword, like we always get now and then in the communities or in the media as well. And very often it is misunderstood as elder abuse. But the simple definition of ageism, and I'm going to read it out, it says, ageism, before that, it's just one of the isms of the world. You know, you have lots of feminism, capitalism, those isms, and the minute that word comes in, we sort of have second thoughts about it, or we're a bit concerned about it, or it's something we want to stay away from. And that's why I'm saying, and I'm glad you said it's a new term that's been branded about. But I just want to read a very simple definition. It says, ageism refers to the stereotypes, prejudices, and discrimination directed towards individuals based on their age, right? Number one. The difference between that and elder abuse is that elder abuse refers to any form of mistreatment or neglect that results in harm or distress to any older adult. So there's a distinct difference between ageism and elder abuse.
Okay, so ageism would be discrimination against an older person.
Yes.
Elder abuse is obviously the harm that's being
perpetrated or practiced on
older people
in the family or communities.
Let's stick with ageism now, and I think it's very relevant in the workplace. Particularly in terms of younger people now coming into the workforce. In South Africa itself, we have a huge youth unemployment, and the concerns of young people when they see older people more experienced, because older people have so much still to give and share with the younger people, but they do see older people as a threat.
Definitely. So in terms of the workplace, but also you'll find that with ageism, there are a few very significant practices that can come down to physical, emotional, obviously, financial is a big one, and social. So when we look at physically, then it's exactly what you're saying. When people are looked down upon, despite the years and years of experience that they have, but they are intimidated. Younger professionals that come in feel intimidated. Even structures, management structures, are choosing younger people. There's a reality about that as well, because older people are much older. They don't have maybe the energy, or they don't have the inclination, or sometimes ageism can also be manifest in older people themselves, who then see themselves as older.
And defunct.
And yet they're not. But in terms of the workplace, I think it's interesting to note that because older people are there doesn't mean they don't know much. Actually, the experiential learning that they got out of their work for the last, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years may be more relevant to that work situation than the younger graduate that comes in. But ageism then is a very subtle way of phasing out the older people. The other big thing, and this may not be directly related to the topic, but I need to add it, and that is that younger generations today, work ethic is very different in any sort of ethnic group, any religious group, any faith-based organization, anywhere. You'll find that the younger people's attitude, I think one, arrogance, I think another, unfortunately, and we have children who are young adults or even parents themselves, and we know of people, but that sort of attitude really is very discriminatory, but it's also for me very disrespectful, especially in the workplace. And that intimidation is the bottom line.
And they're very patronizing because I think they come along with a whole host of degrees or qualifications. Yeah. And even though the older people come with a lot of wisdom and years and years and years of hands-on experience, you have this battle of the experience and wisdom against these diplomas and degrees.
Yeah, exactly.
It's sad because I've often, when I was in the corporate world, I always spoke about this, and I've always said, if you mix your teams with older people and younger people, you'll have such a dynamic force.
Exactly.
But unfortunately, it's the nafs, it's the arrogance, it's our egos.
The egos,
that
mostly.
That takes over on both sides.
Yeah.
On both sides, and this does then create dynamics that is unworkable.
Yeah, exactly. And then when you go to the social level, we'll find that in many areas, older people are sort of marginalized or left out. So, for example, if there's a function somewhere, and I'm talking this about society basically, what happens is the older people are almost always put at the back or either right in front, but very much alone. And they're not inclusive, let me put it that way. Our social circles are not that inclusive. And yet, once again, older people, what is the definition of old age? What is it? In some places, it would be 55, as young as 55. Mostly around here, retirement age is around 60 or 65. In Europe, it's changed a lot. They've actually changed it to be at a much higher age level, so maybe above 65, but very seldom will you find anything less than that, right? And so then financially you'll find insurance policies, medical aid policies, all of those things, the minute you apply and you are at a certain age, that is what ageism is, that it actually does not include you. Again, it's not inclusive of that age. You'll be told you're too old for this sort of policy or whatever, and we're going to increase your premiums, for example, because you're at a risk. But today, Allahu Alam, who knows if I'm young or older and a younger person can get ill before me, can pass on before me. So for me, there's a very big discrepancy there, and it depends on, and you see it in medical care as well, where if there's treatment modality that can be practiced on somebody or somebody needs it, if there are two people, they'll choose the younger person.
They go according to the triage.
Exactly, right? So it'll always the younger person. But I think only when you're older do you understand the pain and the disappointment at that level, at that age, when you are that age, right? When we were also young, much younger ones, and we probably didn't think about it that way. But now that you're older and you look at all these things, it's very difficult today for older people. And again, what is the definition of older? Because you get people at 65 and 66 that are very active, still very active.
And very sharp of mind.
And very sharp of mind. So I think we should rather be balancing it in terms of the capability of that person rather than just their age.
Okay, we're going to an ad break now, but what I would like to share with you very quickly, when you talk about older people being marginalized at social events, I've seen it over and over and over again. And I want to ask you, you can respond after the break, is there a way we can circumvent that and make people realize, hey, I'm in the room, I'm alive, I'm human, I have the same needs as you.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go for our first break. I am talking with Suraya Nawab, and we're talking ageism and elder abuse. Welcome back. My guest is Suraya Nawab. We're talking ageism and elder abuse, and lots and lots of need for introspection from all of us so that we don't become the abuser or we don't become the victim in a situation like this. Suraya, I left you with a thought, and how do we address the situation where older people in a social setting are totally ignored or marginalized? How can they address it at that point in time and not wait for the function to be over, just to say in a respectful way, I'm feeling left out? I don't know. How do you address it?
Okay, so this now brings into a psychosocial aspect of people who are aging or older people, in terms of how do they respond, right? I would think if this happens once too often and it's amongst family members or friends or even extended family, then to actually be included, make yourself inclusive. So, for example, we still have value in terms of the wisdom that we've had over the years, the experiential learning, as I said. And so sometimes in just a discussion, just a general discussion, you'll find, and sometimes it's done very subtly, where people just don't worry about your perspective of that discussion, right? And you may have a burning desire now because you know so much about it, so you want to say something. For me, it would be, again, very sensitively and gently say, I know that this happened, or this happened when we were here, or give your perspective in a way that whoever else is around you will actually then turn to you and say, wow, like she really knows or he really knows so much about this. So I think those of us who are older but still have the zest for life, the willingness to learn, the ability to be able to manage people. In my case, in terms of my private practice, I see this very often where, especially, and I was saying this earlier to you before the program, is that I'm noticing there's a lot more older people, especially women, coming to see me. And this is exactly what they're feeling. They're feeling that sense of disappointment. They're feeling that sense of being left out of certain things in the family or community. And for one, I think it's my age. But number two, I think it's because of the years of experience. So they come to me. But this has not happened before in the community, where you had older men and women, especially women, that seek the sort of way forward for themselves. They know that they're okay, they know they're capable, they're quite physically able to do, think, whatever, but then they find themselves being left out, or they find themselves, our children themselves sometimes feel, you're older now, you can't do this, you're older now, and that power of control about your life is sometimes taken away from a lot of older people, right?
Suraya, can I ask you this question? Because undoubtedly, I see this happening all the time. The marginalization of older people, has it got something to do with the instant age that we're living in, where younger people are wanting everything, instant gratification in all areas of their lives, and dealing with an older person is cramping their style?
I think that's a big thing. We live in a very fast-paced world. We live in the age of AI, and so it's really indicative of something that happened recently. Actually, to me, was that my grandkids were busy playing whatever on their cell phones, and they they're very good with AI now. I mean, 15, 18, 9-year-old, 12-year-old. And they needed, so one of them needed their ChatGPT on the cell phone, and mine was available because the parents, granddad was all busy with theirs. They wanted to use my phone, and they said, "Oh, now we'll have to download it." I said, "No, you don't have to. I do have it." And they were like shocked, like, really? She has AI on her phone. And so that's exactly what I'm saying, is that they mistake us or mislook at us, even if that's a word, but they just, let me say, overlook the fact that we can be with it. We may not be as sharp, as you say, this instant age, and that instant gratification for me is another thing, because that is where, on a practical level, sometimes you'll find that you're rushed along. Like, we need to get somewhere or we need to be somewhere, and you are too slow. You know, in those subtle ways. I don't think children do it purposefully. But I think we then become oversensitized as well, or older people then become oversensitized as well to their surroundings and what is happening around them. So we also need to look at ourselves and say, as you said before, how do I break this? Overall, I think there needs to be much more awareness about ageism, the word itself, that subtle sort of marginalization, but also elder abuse. And, you know, over the years, we've seen so many TV programs on Carte Blanche and so on the documentaries about homes, senior homes and enclaves where there are older people, retirement villages and that, where older people are being abused. And that is elder abuse now, in terms of the neglect or in terms of the slapping or in terms of the rushing around, in terms of not giving food or on time medication, things like that. But also, I think it's important that there's another thing I picked up in our community, and this is also from older clients, is that I don't think there are enough geriatricians in our community, right? Or generally, I mean, when my
Geriatricians
mom
are very scarce. That's very specialized medical practice.
Exactly.
And if you do need to make an appointment with them, you wait months before you can get an appointment with them. Let's understand the importance of being assessed by a geriatrician. Let's put it out there, because people may not be aware of this.
So my mom is now 91 years old, and a few years ago we realized that she needs specialist care, right? And we looked around in Johannesburg, and there were 2 specialist geriatricians. We did take her to one. Both of them were non-Muslim. They were very good with her. Then eventually we realized that there is one female geriatrician in the community, and luckily I knew her, and I didn't know that she had actually specialized in geriatrics, and I found it so refreshing and so important. She actually came home, she assessed my mother for 2 hours. She came up with a plan in terms of her medical care, in terms of her social care, in terms of her emotional needs, and gave us a whole rundown. And I found it so amazing that there's somebody specializing in that. And we know in our communities, if a person can come up to your house, come out on there, you give them the space, your older person is in their familiar space, she can examine them, she can speak to them, she can call you in and say, you know what, mom needs this or dad needs that. I just think there's too few. And I think there's such a gap in the medical fraternity for geriatricians, and ones that are super sensitive to the emotional needs,
our culture and our religion.
And the emotional needs and social needs, psychosocial needs. I think it's so important for that to happen. The other thing for me, and we need both males and females, right? I also think, I know there's been an uptake of old age homes, right? First of all, I think the name should change. The minute you say old age home, you're already discriminating, okay? So I think your society or organizations need to think out of the box, need to be able to have these facilities in place, but also need to have palliative care in place, because not all of us would want to put our mums or dads in an old age facility, right? I know 1 or 2 that are exceptional in terms of care, in terms of the surroundings where the older people are living in terms of inclusivity and all of that. But I think there's also there's a margin open for abuse there, and we need to be very aware of that. But I just think palliative care itself. So a lot of people need the palliative
the end of life care.
At the end of life, the pain management care, to be homebound, but get somebody to come out. So again, over the many years that I've been in practice, cancer care used to be a very good one. The hospice is excellent because they look at everything. Again, I just think you need more Muslim people to be working there, the professionals that can be working in these organizations, because it's end of life care. So if a non-Muslim is there and you're not there for the older person in your family, she will realize and she'll pray the kalima, for example, you know, or she'll sit and just soothe her with zikr or something like that. So I think there are big gaps there. I'm not too sure.
I just want to say something quickly before we carry on, because once again, time for an ad break. But when we talk about, you know, all of these issues, ageism, elder care, etc., I think by way of this program, I'm hoping we have given young people who are in the medical medical area, medical field, and they don't know which speciality to go for, that here is a gap in the market. So medical doctors, if you're wanting to specialize, please think, especially Muslim doctors, think about palliative care, both male and female Muslim doctors. Here is a gap, and I think you'll be more than busy. You'll have lots and lots of patients, inshallah. We are going for an ad break, and inshallah, when we do get back, we'll continue this very, very important discussion. Ageism, and I'm not even sure we're going to have time to talk about elder abuse. If we don't cover it in today's program, we'll have to do a follow-up, inshallah. Please stay with us. Welcome back. We are talking with Suraya Nawab. She is the director of the Muslim AIDS program, which we want to touch on a little later on, inshallah. And of course, we are talking ageism and elderly abuse. Just before the ad break, another thought popped into my mind, and I'm thinking about when we talk about older people being marginalized, what I have also noticed is we're almost treating older people in a social setting like they have a disease, that they probably are hard of hearing, they don't understand, they can't be part of the greater get-together or the greater gathering, so you kind of speak over them. And when you do engage with them, you speak louder than normal, because just because the person is old doesn't mean that they're deaf. And you always tend to repeat yourself or break it down or almost speak to them like you'd be speaking to a child. Would I be correct?
Yeah, definitely so. And so earlier we said, how do we stop this? And one of the reasons is if you're an older person that is experiencing this, then you're actually quite compos mentis, you know exactly what's happening to you. So then actually tell the person, I can hear, I don't need a hearing aid just yet. You can also say it in a very jestful manner, so that the person also, and that for me is important, creating the awareness. And older people, those that are able to, can really be the champions of creating that awareness around what they're going through and what their colleagues or people around them are going through. So that's very important, I think. The other thing is the inclusivity, so in terms of the way, the manner in which we speak to them. Now, if we look at it logically, there's a power shift, obviously. So the simple example is a daughter-in-law who comes into the home, right? And we know, and I'm going to just say it out there, most of our homes are matriarchal, right? We'd like to believe something else, so Islam, as Muslims, we like to say that that's not the case. For me, there should be equality, but we know there are real matriarchs in our communities. And so the daughter-in-law comes in, is young, the mum is still head of the household and makes decisions, and it doesn't matter whether they're living in the extended family or on their own, doesn't matter, but the older mum is, or mother-in-law is the person. As the years go on, the young couple grow up, they have their own businesses, they have their own kids, they have their own little family of procreation and everything. And meanwhile, what's happening to the older mother or father? They're getting older, obviously. So the general degeneration in terms of their health, in terms of their movement, mobility, sometimes in terms of the functioning, right? So the power shifts then. By then, this young couple have entrenched themselves in the family, they're successful, and while mum and dad-in-laws are going down. So can you see that power shift? And when that happens,
carry on.
When that happens, it's almost suddenly when older person realizes that, hey, I don't call the shots anymore. My views are not so important as they were, used to be. Right?
Suraya, don't you think that perhaps the older people are partly to be blamed for this power shift, simply because when the daughter-in-law enters into this new home, the mothers-in-law are so eager to embrace this new person in their family and show them love, unconditional love, and welcoming them into the family, that from the get-go, they give away way too much of their power because you want to make everything right. You want to include them in everything. You want to make this person feel special and important. Invariably or subconsciously, you give away too much of your power. Only to realize maybe 10 years down the line or 20 years down the line, what have I done here? Why and how did I allow this to happen, number one? And number two, mothers-in-law are wanting to keep the peace. So oftentimes when there is a misunderstanding, they'll walk away from it. They'll keep quiet. They won't voice the situation. They won't talk about it to either their husbands or their sons, because the fear of, if there's a big blow-up, if I say something to my son, and he then confronts his wife, and there's a big blow-up, I'll carry the responsibility. My son will never trust me. Or in certain situations where there is fragility in that relationship already, the mother-in-law then thinks, if I say something to my son, what if this blows out of proportion and probably leads to a divorce? I will be carrying that responsibility on my shoulders.
I think that happens more than often in our communities. I also think over the generations, it shouldn't be this way right now. Because like we said, if you look at youth today, 10-year-old is the new 15 probably. Okay?
And then
so
looking
in the same
at
way,
older people,
yes.
The new 70 is now, what's it saying?
So the 50 will be
the 40.
The 40. You see? So, because people think that way, and I want to come in with a very important thing that you brought up in terms of what is the responsibility of these older people, right? The one is to be assertive enough, but keep the balance, not even accept the patronizing attitudes, right, from the younger people. The other for me is that also accept that aging is a process. Also accept that you can age gracefully, and so if you do need hearing aids, for example, then embrace it. But that fighting it all the time in terms of, I'm not so old, I don't need the hearing aids now, or I don't need to be assisted with something. I think the acceptance of your age, it's a process, it's a journey. Rather concentrate on your wisdom, concentrate on how much you can add value to younger people. And that brings me to, I read somewhere a while ago that in one of the Scandinavian countries, what they did was an experimental exercise. What they did is they paired 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds with an older person. And they kept them interacting, and that's another reason and that's another consequence, but also a way in which we can circumvent this problem, is that you'll notice that in that study, the older people just flourished. They just loved, and these are little kids, right? And they played games with them, and they just did exercises with them, and they just spoke to them, and in their own little language, you know. And we spoke earlier about sometimes we start speaking to older people as if they're little now, so that infantile sort of attitude we have towards them, right? And this study was amazing because older people that were having starting of dementia and things like that actually started remembering more. The other thing for me is also that there's this phenomenon in the community that little children must not, what can I say, disturb the older people or keep them away. But you'll find from this experiment, you'll find that it just lifts them up, it lifts their moods up, it lifts their mobility up. And I think that experiment is something that we can learn so much from, because we all have grandchildren, we all have other nieces, nephews, kids and that. And if there's an older person there, try and interact more, give that interconnectedness of generations, right? And then the teenagers, get them to speak to the older people about what's happening. So if they're watching a program, for example, talk about it with them, right? The other big thing I found in a lot of my clients is that people view them in a certain, put them in a certain category, and yet they don't feel that age or to be treated that way. And as I said, they don't bring it up. So you can bring it up to your children, for example, and you can tell them, listen, I can't do this, I can't do that. The denialism in older people is another big problem, because if they need help with something, I actually don't know what it is in their heads, but no, don't do it, I will do it myself.
Maybe they're trying to assert their independence.
That's the thing, the lack of the reduction of the independence and the need to be asking somebody to do something for you. That's a cultural thing. That is a cultural thing. If you look at us and our communities and our families, it's like, we spoke about matriarchs earlier. It's like, I've been in control and I've managed everything. I can do this. And meanwhile, you'll find that she can't manage or he can't manage, right?
But so if the person can manage, we need to allow them to continue, because it gives them purpose. Yeah. It gives them the sense of, I'm a part of the bigger...
Of something. Yeah, family.
Absolutely.
I'm respected, because older people feel completely disrespected, right? So I think for me, the important thing in terms of reducing the ageism phenomenon in our community is that, first of all, we need to create much more awareness about it, and having more medical professionals to it, even psychologists and life coaches and that, concentrate on. Old people also have goals. You can do a whole goal setting exercise with them in proportion to their needs and their abilities at that time, right? The other thing is create a rapport between the kids and the older person, and maybe teenagers and older persons, so that they have that. And in terms of experience, I found another very important thing, and that is that when you sit with older people and you focus on what they can't do, it becomes a very heavy discussion. So then you'll end up saying to them, but you can do this, you try to do this, go and make sure you wear your hearing aids, But if we speak to them about older times, when they were younger, you'll notice, and I'd like the listeners to actually experiment with this, right? The first one is having younger kids with older people most of the time and see the difference. The other is start, as adults ourselves, start speaking to them about their old lives, what they used to do, especially with dementia and that, right? You'll find them have long-term memory, they don't have short-term memory.
Okay.
But if you speak to them about, so where did you live? What do you know this happened? Or do you remember where we were? Do you remember we were little children and this is what we did together? They start having such a brightness in terms of what they can talk about, in terms of even their facial expressions change. So I think give them that opportunity to do that.
We've got to go for the next ad break. I did say that we'll probably run out of time regarding this particular subject, but we will revisit elder abuse in another show. Let's go for a break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about the Muslim AIDS program. Welcome back. We're into the final segment of our discussion today. Suraya Nawab is my guest, and we're talking ageism and dynamics, power dynamics between older people and younger people, and the impact felt by both parties, obviously. So let's get talking more about this issue. Suraya, early on we spoke about when younger people, the daughter-in-law or the daughter or the son-in-law, marginalizes the older people in the family, or if there are issues, older people don't address them simply because they don't want to cause a further fracture in that relationship. In your opinion and all your years of experience as a counselor, do you believe that when things happen, one should perhaps address it immediately, because it can build up over time and you can then one day have a major explosion? And when you deal with it, how does one, you know, without being accusatory, how does one go about addressing the issues?
I think a lot of it is about the relationships that you foster once this new young woman or young man comes into your life as a daughter-in-law or a son-in-law, or even cousin-in-law or niece-in-law, for example. I think a lot depends on that. What sort of communication pattern have you fostered? Is it an open one where they can come to you and speak? Again, there's boundaries there, right? And sometimes older people also feel very entitled. Okay, and so
they can push it as
they
well.
Can push it, push the limits a little bit, the boundaries, right? So I think a lot has to do with how you see yourself, okay, and the role that you play in this home. And you can, and also be aware of, and you don't have to read a textbook to do this, your generational learning will teach you that there are developmental stages in a marriage as well, you know. Your own marriage, you can look at it, you know, and this is a young couple that come in. So I think a lot of it has to do with the openness of communication, where you can maybe sit down with them. If you can't, then at least you can sit down with your son or daughter, if it's the other way around, and say, look, this is bothering me. Can we address it in some way? And I think the key, one of it is, it can be that address it as soon as you see things happening, so that you also don't sit with this festering sort of suppression of feeling neglected or feeling disappointed by what is happening or feeling marginalized. I mean, that word we've used so many times today. And so if you in a sensitive way address it, it'll help. The thing about that is, don't have expectations that are unrealistic. Don't say, I'm going to address this with the couple or my son or my daughter, but I want them to be this way and I want this to happen for me. You need to be a bit sensitive to their life as well, where they are in their marriage, and then talk around it. Find an amicable solution for you and for them. You cannot be this very dogmatic, authoritarian person. And this is not about young people and, as we said earlier, the sort of attitudes and egotistical, arrogant behavior that we see in our young people. It's
That's
not
to say that older people don't display those behaviors.
Yeah, exactly, because some people then really stretch the boundaries, as we said, some older people. But then I just want to bring in one or two very pertinent but very real experiences, you know. And that is that today you'll get older women who we would see as over 50 or 55, and we spoke earlier in terms of what is the age of that you say a person is older, right? But you'll get people who, again, have the zest for life, will go to gym, will do whatever younger people in the community will run, will do comrades, for example, or make sure that they exercise very well and all of that. I think if we're saying older people are more mature and wise, then you don't compare yourself to a 30-year-old daughter-in-law or daughter, Okay, so again, this is a cultural thing, and call me old-fashioned, doesn't matter. But for me, you can't go and dress like a 30-year-old at gym, right? Or you can't, or even when you go out. I think that acceptance of your stage in your life and the understanding that actually it's made me a better person. The knowledge I've gained, the wisdom, the experiential learning, and wear your wrinkles with pride, because it shows worth. It shows, and your self-worth can be right there, you know. But you don't have to be. The other thing in families, I've heard this over with clients as well, is that you would go and, I don't know, ask your daughter-in-law or daughter to wear something from her cupboard,
Ooh.
which is completely not age appropriate. Okay, now. So I think older people also need to know where their boundaries are and find. For me, that's a problem of self-worth. I would sit across from that older person and speak to them about what is your self-worth? How do you see yourself? Do you find it necessary to go and dress like a 30-year-old, for example? Why? Why would you do that? Are you not happy with your own body image? Are you not accepting the fact that you now are older? What is it? So it's not so much the younger person in the family. It's the older person themselves, and I guess that's why I'm getting a real a lot of older people coming to see me in terms of these very real issues that happen in families, right?
Something very important I have to bring up. We are talking ageism. We are talking about kindness and love and respect to older people. And you've just raised something very important about body image, self-worth, wanting to compete with a younger daughter or the younger daughter-in-law. But we do also know that older people tend to play on the emotions of the younger people when it comes to finances or when it comes to inclusiveness.
Yeah.
I've just got tongue-tied there. To be more inclusive in their lives. So they play the emotional card. So they're also guilty a lot of the time regarding the dynamics that goes on in that particular family.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we should to have a balanced view, and I'm sure there are listeners who are older or younger here, or viewers. We need to find a balance. And for me, it comes with accepting your age, accepting your trajectory of life, and making good on where you are. Embrace it, you know. Don't fight it, because the minute you fight it, you're going to want to be that younger person. And let's face it, you'll sometimes see older people dressed very inappropriately, age appropriately, or inappropriately, and it looks horrendous. They just look out of place. And again, for me, there is about self-image, about self-esteem and self-worth. And then you brought up another thing in terms of respect, right? And for me, I think the younger people in your community will respect you more if you carry your age well enough in the family. You know, you still have a place there, but when you relinquish that in favor of trying to be younger or trying to be authoritarian, then you are to blame for that as an older person. So I think ageism, for me, is generally a discriminatory process where we start looking at older people as different, as not important, as not worthy of anything. That sort of stereotypical understanding of the isms, like I said before, is almost always very negative. Okay, and like you said, we're not going to have time to talk about elder abuse. There's a big difference there, right? But I think the fact that hopefully this program has just brought in this buzzword, so as you said earlier, people can reflect and say to themselves, what do I make of this word, ageism? What does it mean for me? What does it mean for the older people around me and the community or society as a whole? You know, so you'll also find another very very prominent or prevalent experience that happens is that a lot of organizations have these, women's organizations have these old age or retire. I don't know what they call it. Old age lunches or breakfast. Or
Okay, we're
something.
almost running out of time. 1 minute to go, so you can finish that
Yeah,
thought,
I just want to
please.
say that you'll find older people say to you, I've been invited to this brunch or lunch or whatever, but I don't think I'm old enough to go.
The golden oldie
You
lunches.
see? Exactly. But then, I mean, it's about your self-concept, right? It's about you. So if you're 60 and you can be really with it in terms of everything in life, but embrace that age, right? For me, when we don't do that,
Or even
we'll find
mid-60s, because I find 60-year-olds are very young,
Yeah,
in this day and
exactly,
age.
exactly.
So your mid-60s,
Yes,
embrace
exactly.
it.
Yeah, because they themselves will say, "Oh no, I'm now 62," and I've heard this. I'm not thumb sucking. This is what I've heard in sessions, is that I'm now 62 years old and I can't drive around. So they must get me my groceries. They must take me to the doctor. They must take me for wherever, visiting my friend or to a janaza or something like that. Why do you do that to yourself?
Yeah.
And then it's perpetuated by the younger people who see that you want to be included and they feel you have a place, but you're not embracing that that part of your life.
You're not embracing, you're imposing on them. Suraya, unfortunately, we didn't touch on elder abuse. I hope that you can make time available for us to talk about that and the MAP program, inshallah, as soon as you are available. Shukran so very much for your insights. I've always told you, always a pleasure to have you on the show. And that's where we leave it today. I certainly hope this is going to give you time to reflect on what we've unpacked on the show this morning. And if you are abusing consciously or subconsciously older people, then you need to rethink your behavior. Till next week at the same time, as always, Assalamu alaikum and Khuda Hafiz.